People can promise anything, but what they repeatedly do will always speak louder. Patterns reveal character, reveal priorities, reveal emotional capacity, and reveal truth. And once you learn to pay attention to patterns, you gain clarity in every area of life: relationships, friendships, communication, and self-growth. You learn to see people as they are, not as you wish they would be, and that awareness brings a quiet kind of strength that no promise can ever replace. Social intelligence is the ability to read the room without forcing yourself into it, because true influence never comes from demanding attention. It comes from understanding energy, emotions, and dynamics before you even speak. A socially intelligent person doesn't rush to prove themselves or dominate a space. Instead, they observe. They notice the subtleties that others overlook. They pay attention to body language, tone, silence, tension, and flow. They can sense when to engage and when to step back, when to speak and when to simply listen. This quiet awareness allows them to navigate any environment with ease because they're not trying to fit in. They're understanding what is already happening and moving in harmony with it. To read the room is to read people beyond their words. When someone enters a space, they carry a mood, a story, and an emotional vibration. Some walk in radiating confidence, others carry stress, insecurity, or excitement. Social intelligence is the skill of tuning in to those signals without making assumptions or taking anything personally. It is recognizing who feels comfortable and who feels anxious, who wants attention and who wants space, who is open and who is guarded. You learn to feel the emotional temperature before you contribute anything to it. It also means understanding group dynamics. Every room has unwritten rules, dominant personalities, quieter observers, leaders, followers, and connectors. Instead of barging in and trying to take control, a socially intelligent person recognizes these dynamics and adapts. They don't force their voice into a conversation that's already moving smoothly. They don't interrupt to prove they belong. They join with intention, timing, and awareness, adding value rather than noise. This makes them naturally magnetic because their presence feels harmonious, not disruptive. Social intelligence is not about manipulation or pretending to be someone else. It's about respectful awareness. When you understand the energy in a room, you become better at showing up authentically because you know how to adjust your communication without betraying who you are. It's being flexible, not fake. It's aligning your tone, pace, and message with what will be received, rather than insisting that others adjust to you. This is why socially intelligent people are often described as easy to talk to or naturally likable. They create emotional safety by meeting others where they are. Reading the room also involves understanding silence. Many people feel uncomfortable when things get quiet. They rush to fill the gap. But social intelligence recognizes that silence is information. Silence tells you when people are thinking, when they feel unsure, when the topic isn't resonating, or when the emotional atmosphere has shifted. Instead of panicking, a socially intelligent person uses silence to learn. They observe how people respond to it and allow the moment to guide their next move. A big part of not forcing yourself into a room is knowing that you don't need to be the center of attention to make an impact. Social intelligence understands that presence is more powerful than performance. Simply being grounded, observant, and genuinely engaged often speaks louder than the person who constantly tries to dominate. People are drawn to those who listen more than they talk, who understand more than they judge, and who contribute meaningfully rather than aggressively. This ability also requires emotional regulation. You cannot read the room accurately if your own emotions are too loud. If you walk into a space trying to soothe your insecurities, impress others, or prove something, you'll miss what's actually happening around you. Social intelligence begins with self-awareness, knowing your triggers, calming your internal noise, and grounding yourself so that you can perceive others clearly. When you are not preoccupied with your own ego or anxiety, you naturally tune into the energy of the environment. Reading the room without forcing yourself into it also means respecting boundaries, both yours and others. Socially intelligent people sense when someone does not want to talk, when a group is having a private moment, or when the timing isn't right to share something personal. They can feel when they are welcome and when their presence might be overwhelming. Instead of ignoring these cues, they honor them. This builds trust because people feel seen and respected, not pressured. Another key aspect is flexibility. Social intelligence allows you to shift your approach depending on the environment. The way you behave in a formal work meeting is different from how you act with close friends or in a creative brainstorming session. You don't change who you are, you change how you express yourself. You adjust your emotional tone, your pace of interaction, and your level of openness. This adaptability makes people feel comfortable around you because you understand the context. Socially intelligent individuals are also great at noticing micro-expressions and subtle behavioral cues. A raised eyebrow, a slight lean forward, a tight jaw, crossed arms, or a softened gaze. These small signals reveal what people feel beneath their words. When you can pick up on these cues, you respond in ways that make others feel understood. This gives you the ability to de-escalate tension, support someone who feels overwhelmed, or shift the conversation in a more positive direction. Many conflicts can be avoided simply by paying attention to these early signs. Reading the room is also about humility. People who feel the need to dominate conversations or force themselves into attention are often insecure. Social intelligence knows that real confidence does not need constant validation. It knows when to speak up and when to step back. It knows that influence comes from adding value, not from being loud. It understands that being present does not always mean being visible. When you embody this skill, you start to move through the world with a sense of calm authority. You don't feel pressured to impress anyone because you're too busy understanding them. You don't feel the need to interrupt because you're listening. You don't feel the need to force connection because you're allowing relationships to form naturally. You become someone who people trust, someone who people gravitate toward, someone who elevates the emotional environment just by being attuned to it. Social intelligence allows you to walk into any room, whether it's filled with strangers, leaders, critics, or friends, and feel at ease. You don't need permission to belong because you understand how to blend observation with authentic participation. You move with awareness, empathy, and emotional clarity. You read the room effortlessly, not by overwhelming it, but by understanding it deeply. You carry yourself with a quiet power that doesn't need to force anything, because presence rooted in awareness is the strongest presence of all. Emotionally intelligent people respond, they do not react, because they understand that impulsive reactions come from unfiltered emotion, while thoughtful responses come from clarity, self-control, and intention. When someone is emotionally intelligent, they don't let their immediate feelings take over the steering wheel of their behavior. They don't allow anger, fear, or insecurity to speak for them. Instead, they pause, they breathe. They create space between what they feel and what they choose to do with that feeling. This small moment of awareness is what separates emotional chaos from emotional mastery. A reaction is automatic. It's instinctual, raw, and often driven by past wounds rather than present reality. When someone reacts, they usually speak before thinking, decide before understanding, or judge before processing. Their nervous system takes over, and their behavior becomes a reflection of old patterns, old triggers, and old stories. That's why reactions often make situations worse. They escalate conflict, damage relationships, or leave a person feeling regretful once the emotion fades. But a response comes from presence. It comes from emotional grounding. A response is not suppressing emotion. It is managing emotion. It is allowing yourself to feel fully without letting those feelings dictate your actions. Emotionally intelligent people do not run from their emotions, they observe them. They notice their body tightening, their heart accelerating, or their thoughts becoming defensive. They understand that these sensations are signals, not commands. They use this awareness to choose the most constructive way forward. People who respond instead of react gain an incredible advantage in communication. They listen fully before speaking, not just to the words but also to the tone, the intention, and the unspoken emotion behind what the other person is saying. They don't rush to defend themselves, and they don't interpret everything as a personal attack. They seek to understand, and because they understand first, their response carries clarity, empathy, and precision. Their words become bridges, not weapons. Responding also means acknowledging emotion without being controlled by it. For example, someone who feels anger doesn't pretend they aren't angry. They recognize the anger, explore where it's coming from, and then decide how to express themselves in a way that is firm but respectful. Someone who feels hurt doesn't lash out or shut down. They communicate their pain honestly, but with grace. This ability to regulate emotion allows them to maintain dignity even in heated moments. Emotionally intelligent people also understand that reactions often come from the ego, wanting to be right, wanting the last word, wanting to defend pride. But responses come from wisdom. Wisdom knows that being right is less important than being kind. Wisdom knows that understanding the situation is more valuable than winning the argument. Wisdom knows that emotions are fleeting, but the consequences of emotional reactions can last for a long time. Another reason emotionally intelligent people respond, rather than react, is that they are deeply aware of their triggers. They know the patterns that make them defensive, the tones that irritate them, the phrases that hurt them, and the situations that activate old wounds. Instead of letting these triggers control them, they use them as opportunities for growth. When a trigger appears, they pause and ask themselves, is this about the present moment, or is this touching a deeper wound? With that awareness, they gain control over their internal state, rather than letting their internal state take control of them. Responding also builds trust. People feel safe around those who stay calm under pressure, who communicate clearly even when emotions run high, and who don't explode or withdraw unexpectedly. Emotional stability is magnetic. It creates a sense of predictability and security. This is why emotionally intelligent people often become natural leaders. They inspire confidence by showing that they can handle challenges without allowing emotion to cloud their judgment. In relationships, the difference between reacting and responding determines whether conflicts heal or escalate. Reactions create division. They turn partners into opponents. Responses create connection. They turn partners into teammates working through a problem together. When someone responds, they choose to protect the relationship instead of attacking the person. They choose understanding over defensiveness, presence over impulsiveness, and empathy over ego. Emotionally intelligent people also recognize that responding gives them control over their life. When you react, you are controlled by your environment. When you respond, you control your environment. Reactions are external-driven, responses are self-driven. This means emotionally intelligent people live more peacefully because they don't let every problem, comment, or inconvenience disrupt their inner stability. They carry a calm confidence that nothing outside of them has the power to dictate their behavior unless they allow it. This doesn't mean emotionally intelligent people never feel strong emotions. They do. They feel deeply. But they have learned that emotions are messages, not directives. They can sit with discomfort without rushing to release it through impulsive action. They can hold space for tension without trying to escape it. They can channel their emotions into clarity instead of chaos. Responding requires patience. And emotionally intelligent people cultivate patience daily. They know that a moment of silence can prevent hours of conflict. They know that taking a breath can save a relationship. They know that thinking before speaking can protect their integrity. They know that stepping back for perspective can transform how they interpret a situation. In essence, they choose long-term peace over short-term release. They choose understanding over impulsiveness. They choose self-awareness over emotional autopilot. They choose the version of themselves that acts with intention, rather than the version that reacts with instinct. And through this choice, they develop a level of emotional maturity that elevates every part of their life: relationships, communication, conflict, decision-making, and self-growth. Understanding human psychology removes personal insecurity because it allows you to see behavior, motivation, and thought patterns not as personal attacks or judgments, but as natural responses shaped by emotions, experiences, and environment. Most insecurities arise from misinterpretation. When someone says or does something that triggers fear, doubt, or inadequacy within us, we often assume it reflects our worth. We think, they don't like me because I'm not good enough, or I must have failed, or I'm being judged unfairly. These thoughts, while automatic, are rarely accurate assessments of reality. They are emotional projections. Understanding human psychology teaches you why people act the way they do, and once you see behavior in context, you no longer internalize it as a personal failing. Human behavior is guided by motives, needs, and past experiences. Every action is filtered through a person's perspective. Someone may criticize not because you are inadequate, but because they are frustrated, insecure, or struggling themselves. Someone may ignore you, not because you are unworthy of attention, but because their attention is consumed elsewhere or their emotional bandwidth is limited. Understanding this removes the immediacy of self-blame. When you know the causes behind behavior, you stop assuming it is about you, and insecurity loses its grip. Psychology also teaches about cognitive biases, automatic mental shortcuts that distort perception. Insecurity is often fueled by biases like mind reading, where we assume we know what others think of us; personalization, where we take responsibility for events outside our control; and catastrophizing, where we imagine the worst-case scenario. By understanding these cognitive patterns, you begin to see your thoughts as mental constructs rather than absolute truth. You start to notice when your mind is exaggerating, misinterpreting, or projecting, which creates emotional space and reduces the automatic self-doubt that insecurity feeds on. Emotional triggers are another key area of human psychology that, once understood, diminishes insecurity. Everyone has triggers: specific situations, words, or behaviors that evoke strong emotions. When someone reacts defensively to your comment, it might trigger fear of rejection in you. When someone succeeds where you feel you have failed, it might trigger comparison and inadequacy. Psychology helps you recognize these triggers and understand that they are internal responses shaped by past experiences, not universal truths. By observing your triggers without judgment, you prevent them from controlling your self-worth. Understanding human needs also dismantles insecurity. Every person acts based on needs such as belonging, recognition, respect, safety, and control. When you recognize that people's actions often reflect the pursuit or frustration of these needs, you stop interpreting them as reflections of your value. If someone criticizes you harshly, psychology teaches that their need for control or validation may be influencing their behavior. If someone excludes you, it may be about their social dynamics rather than your worth. When behavior is seen as a response to needs rather than a judgment of your character, insecurity loses its personal hold. Psychology also illuminates the universality of imperfection. Understanding that everyone has biases, fears, and flaws normalizes human imperfection and prevents the tendency to compare yourself harshly against others. Insecurity often comes from holding oneself to unrealistic standards while assuming everyone else measures up effortlessly. By seeing that others are as flawed, uncertain, and emotional as you are, you stop harshly judging yourself. This perspective shifts the focus from self-criticism to self-acceptance. Social psychology provides additional tools for reducing insecurity. Humans are highly influenced by social cues, group norms, and perceived expectations. Insecurity often arises from overvaluing external validation or interpreting social feedback as absolute truth. Understanding social psychology allows you to see that people's behaviors are influenced by context, culture, and their own mental state. Someone's critique or approval is shaped as much by their environment and biases as it is by you. This understanding reduces the tendency to internalize social signals as measures of self-worth. Moreover, psychological principles teach the power of mindset and self-perception. Insecurity thrives when you define yourself through external approval or negative comparison. By applying psychological insights, you can reframe self-perception, focusing on internal validation, personal growth, and objective self-reflection. Cognitive behavioral frameworks, for example, encourage evaluating evidence before accepting negative beliefs, noticing thought distortions, and replacing self-critical narratives with constructive ones. This directly diminishes insecurity by giving you tools to interpret reality more accurately and respond more rationally. Psychology also teaches resilience through understanding stress, fear, and coping mechanisms. Insecure reactions often come from overestimating threats or underestimating personal ability. By understanding how the mind amplifies fear and exaggerates risk, you can manage these reactions more effectively. You learn to differentiate between actual danger and imagined failure, reducing anxiety-driven insecurity. Emotional regulation strategies, grounded in psychological principles, allow you to stay calm under perceived judgment or social pressure, reinforcing a sense of internal security. Additionally, understanding developmental psychology provides context for insecurities rooted in early experiences. Many feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt originate in childhood through parental expectations, social comparison, or formative interactions. Recognizing the origins of these feelings enables you to reframe them. You can see that these insecurities are learned patterns, not intrinsic flaws, and that they can be unlearned or managed. This perspective creates distance from self-doubt, reducing its power over your present sense of self. Finally, psychology helps you cultivate empathy for both yourself and others. Insecurity often stems from harsh self-judgment, which psychology teaches is counterproductive. By understanding human behavior and cognition, you recognize that everyone struggles internally, everyone makes mistakes, and everyone has vulnerabilities. This awareness fosters self-compassion and reduces self-critical comparisons. When you extend this understanding outward, you see others' actions as human, not threatening, which further diminishes anxiety and insecurity in social or personal interactions. In essence, understanding human psychology transforms the lens through which you view yourself and others. It teaches that behavior is rarely a reflection of personal inadequacy, that thoughts and emotions are shaped by predictable patterns, and that most human reactions are about needs, triggers, and past experiences rather than judgments of worth. By seeing these truths, personal insecurity loses its foundation. You gain insight, perspective, and tools to navigate interactions, emotions, and self-perception with clarity and confidence. The awareness and understanding psychology create a stable internal environment where insecurity no longer dictates thought, feeling, or behavior. Mastery comes from connection, not manipulation, because true influence is built on trust, respect, and understanding, not control, coercion, or deceit. Manipulation might produce short-term results, but it cannot create lasting impact, loyalty, or genuine relationships. Connection, on the other hand, taps into the natural human need to be understood, valued, and supported. When you cultivate connection, you inspire others to follow, cooperate, and engage willingly. Mastery, in any field, whether personal, professional, or social, is rooted in this voluntary alignment of energy, not in forcing someone to comply through fear, guilt, or cunning tactics. Connection begins with empathy. When you can feel and understand what another person is experiencing, you can communicate in ways that resonate deeply. Empathy allows you to see beyond surface-level behavior and understand the emotions, motivations, and intentions driving actions. This insight creates influence without coercion because people respond to leaders, peers, or mentors who understand them, who listen without judgment, and who demonstrate genuine care. Connection built on empathy is reciprocal. The more you give attention and understanding, the more people naturally open up and align with your vision. Manipulation, by contrast, is inherently transactional and one-sided. It treats people as means to an end rather than as humans with their own needs and desires. A manipulator may achieve a temporary outcome, convincing someone to act against their better judgment, bending rules, or gaining compliance. But the effect is shallow. The moment the manipulation is revealed, trust evaporates. Relationships fracture, influence disappears. Long-term mastery requires more than temporary compliance. It requires voluntary participation, respect, and alignment of values, which can only come from authentic connection. Building connection requires authenticity. People sense when someone is being genuine and when they are performing a role to control perception. Authenticity creates credibility because it demonstrates consistency between words, actions, and intent. When you are authentic, people trust that your motives are transparent, that your guidance is reliable, and that your influence is not self-serving. Authentic connection inspires loyalty because people feel safe aligning with someone who is true to themselves rather than strategically manipulating appearances. Communication is the bridge between connection and mastery. Effective communication is rooted in clarity, listening, and resonance. When you speak from understanding and intention rather than from a desire to control, your message lands more effectively. People respond to clarity and coherence. They align with leaders or peers who articulate ideas that reflect shared values or mutual understanding. This is vastly different from manipulation, which relies on confusion, pressure, or misinformation to bend perception. Connection in communication involves dialogue, not monologue. It involves understanding others' perspectives before presenting your own. This two-way flow strengthens influence because people feel heard and validated. Connection also involves emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, interpret, and respond appropriately to emotions in yourself and others. Emotional intelligence enables you to navigate complex social dynamics without resorting to coercion. When you understand what motivates or concerns people, you can guide behavior and decisions in ways that respect their autonomy. Manipulation, in contrast, exploits emotions, often provoking fear, guilt, or shame to achieve compliance. While manipulation may produce immediate results, it creates resistance, resentment, and long-term disengagement. Mastery requires the opposite, creating alignment through respect for others' emotions and autonomy. Trust is the foundation of connection and, consequently, mastery. Trust emerges when people consistently experience honesty, reliability, and care in interactions. When trust is present, influence is effortless. People follow willingly because they believe in your integrity, judgment, and intentions. Manipulation undermines trust because it introduces doubt about motives and honesty. People can detect even subtle attempts to control, and once detected, trust deteriorates rapidly. Connection fosters resilience and collaboration, while manipulation breeds fragility and suspicion. Connection also encourages collaboration and shared growth. Mastery is rarely achieved in isolation. Even the most skilled individuals depend on networks, mentors, teams, and relationships. When you connect authentically, people are more willing to share knowledge, offer support, and contribute their strengths. This collaborative energy accelerates learning, creativity, and performance. Manipulation, on the other hand, isolates. It relies on control rather than cooperation, and in doing so, it limits access to resources, ideas, and support networks that are essential for true mastery. Listening is a critical component of connection. People feel valued when their thoughts, concerns, and ideas are acknowledged. Emotionally intelligent listening allows you to understand the needs, aspirations, and fears of others. This awareness enables influence that is aligned with mutual benefit. Manipulation often ignores listening. It imposes an agenda without consideration for the other party. The result is compliance that is superficial and resistance that is latent. Mastery, rooted in connection, relies on understanding before acting, not acting before understanding. Connection also thrives on vulnerability. Sharing experiences, challenges, and lessons in a genuine way fosters empathy and relatability. Vulnerability humanizes you, making it easier for others to trust and follow your guidance. Manipulators rarely show vulnerability because their strategy depends on appearing in control and untouchable. The absence of vulnerability creates emotional distance, whereas connection built on shared humanity deepens influence. Mastery grows when people see you as approachable, relatable, and sincere. Influence through connection is sustainable. People align with those they respect, trust, and feel understood by. This alignment endures through challenges, disagreements, and mistakes. Manipulation produces temporary results that collapse under stress, scrutiny, or changing circumstances. True mastery relies on the long-term cultivation of respect, trust, and cooperation, which are only possible through genuine connection. Connection also encourages self-awareness. In order to connect effectively, you must understand your own values, intentions, and behaviors. This self-awareness allows you to interact authentically and respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Manipulation requires ignoring or suppressing self-awareness, as the focus is on control rather than alignment. Mastery emerges from awareness and authenticity, not from tactics designed to bend others to your will. Ultimately, mastery achieved through connection is grounded in mutual benefit and respect. It is not about getting someone to act against their nature or desires. It is about creating situations where alignment occurs naturally. People feel valued, understood, and inspired, and in that environment, influence flows effortlessly. Manipulation may create the illusion of control, but it cannot sustain it. Connection, however, builds influence that is enduring, relationships that are resilient, and mastery that is authentic, effective, and empowering. Human behavior is predictable when you understand emotional triggers, because emotions are the invisible strings that pull human actions into motion long before logic ever enters the picture. Most people assume that behavior is random or complicated, but it becomes surprisingly clear once you learn to see the emotional spark behind the reaction. Every decision a person makes, every conversation they avoid, every argument they start, and every opportunity they chase or abandon can be traced back to what they feel, whether they are aware of it or not. Emotions shape behavior more than intelligence, more than intentions, more than beliefs. And once you understand what triggers a person emotionally, you can almost forecast their next move with startling accuracy. Emotional triggers come from past experiences, subconscious fears, personal insecurities, unmet needs, and deeply rooted desires. When something touches these areas, people respond automatically, often without thinking, because emotional reactions happen faster than rational ones. The brain is wired to protect, to react, to avoid pain and pursue comfort, and therefore behavior becomes a reflection of whatever emotion is activated in the moment. When someone feels disrespected, even slightly, they may shut down or lash out. When someone feels unseen, they might over-explain, overcompensate, or try to prove their worth. When someone feels unsafe, they might become defensive, rigid, or controlling. And when someone feels valued, they relax, open up, listen more, and contribute more. These patterns repeat because emotional triggers operate like internal buttons. And once you identify those buttons, you understand why people behave the way they do. Think about someone who gets angry quickly. On the surface, anger looks like the problem. But anger is almost always a mask covering something else: fear, embarrassment, disappointment, rejection, or helplessness. When you learn to see the emotion beneath the emotion, their behavior starts to make sense. Their anger is predictable because the trigger behind it is predictable. It might be criticism, even when delivered kindly. It might be being ignored. It might be feeling powerless. And once you see the pattern, you can anticipate their reactions with clarity, not confusion. The same is true with withdrawal. When someone pulls away emotionally, it often comes from feelings of overwhelm, fear of conflict, or fear of being misunderstood. The trigger might be confrontation, vulnerability, or even simple misunderstandings. But when you know what touches that wound inside them, you understand why they retreat. You're no longer surprised by it. You expect it. And because you expect it, you can navigate it with patience rather than frustration. People who seek constant validation behave predictably too. They respond strongly to praise, approval, and attention because their emotional trigger is tied to self-worth. The slightest sign of disapproval can cause anxiety, stress, or overthinking. They may change their behavior to fit in, avoid conflict to stay liked, or overextend themselves to earn affection. This predictability isn't weakness, it's human nature. And once you see the emotional need behind the behavior, you no longer misinterpret the person as needy or dramatic. You understand the emotional logic behind their actions. Human behavior also becomes predictable when you understand which emotions people avoid. Avoidance is one of the clearest behavioral patterns. Someone who hates feeling vulnerable will avoid deep conversations. Someone who hates feeling judged will avoid taking risks. Someone who hates feeling powerless will avoid situations they can't control, and someone who hates feeling inferior might avoid people who seem more successful or confident. These avoidance patterns tell you more about the person than anything they say out loud, because avoidance is the brain's attempt to protect emotional wounds from being exposed. Even positive emotions shape predictable behavior. If someone feels respected, they engage differently. If someone feels inspired, they take action. If someone feels safe, they become more honest. If someone feels appreciated, they give more of themselves. These emotions activate the best parts of a person, and when you know what brings those emotions out, you understand exactly how to support and elevate them. Understanding emotional triggers is also the key to mastering relationships. When you know what triggers your loved ones, you stop pushing buttons unintentionally. You stop interpreting their reactions as personal attacks. Instead, you see the child in them who never felt heard, the adult who was hurt too deeply, the person who is still learning how to trust, or the human who simply feels too much. Emotional triggers reveal the story of a person's past, and once you see the story, their behavior stops being confusing and becomes understandable. In communication, understanding triggers helps you respond instead of react. If someone is triggered by criticism, you learn to approach situations with more empathy. If someone is triggered by being ignored, you make sure they feel acknowledged. If someone is triggered by uncertainty, you offer clarity. And if someone is triggered by conflict, you adjust your tone, your pace, and your approach. This is not manipulation, it is awareness. It is the ability to speak the emotional language of the person in front of you. When you understand that behavior is emotionally driven, you stop expecting people to act according to logic. Logic plays a role, but emotion sets the foundation. In fact, most decisions are made emotionally first, then justified logically after. People buy based on emotion, argue based on emotion, fall in love based on emotion, and distance themselves based on emotion. Even the strongest, most rational individuals are guided by emotional impulses beneath the surface. Knowing this allows you to see people clearly, not through the lens of judgment, but through the lens of psychology. You also begin to see that your own behavior is predictable too. Your triggers influence your reactions, your relationships, your confidence, and your choices. When you learn your emotional triggers, you gain power over yourself. You notice the moments when something inside you reacts before your mind does. You notice the patterns that repeat through your life. And once you can identify the trigger, you can control the response. That is the beginning of emotional mastery. Human behavior becomes predictable when you understand emotional triggers, because emotions are the blueprint of human action. Beneath every reaction is a feeling. Beneath every feeling is a story. And beneath every story is a trigger waiting to be understood. When you learn to see those triggers, you see people, not as random, complicated mysteries, but as human beings driven by emotions that make perfect sense once you learn how to read them. Social intelligence begins with self-awareness, because you cannot understand the emotional world of others until you understand the emotional world within yourself. Every interaction you have with people is filtered through your internal state, your beliefs, your fears, your insecurities, your assumptions, and the unspoken narratives you carry. If you don't know what's happening inside you, you will misread what's happening around you. Self-awareness teaches you to separate your projections from reality, your emotions from the moment, and your past from the present. It clears the fog that distorts perception so you can see people more accurately, respond more thoughtfully, and connect more authentically. When you lack self-awareness, you move through social situations reacting instead of responding. You take things personally, not because others intended harm, but because your own wounds were pressed. You misunderstand people not because they're unclear, but because your mind is busy interpreting their behavior through your emotional biases. Self-awareness makes you a better observer of yourself, which automatically makes you a better observer of others. You start recognizing when your irritation is coming from you, not from them. You realize when your assumptions are just stories created by old experiences. You begin to notice when your mind is rushing to defend you even in situations where no threat actually exists. This inner understanding makes you more stable, and stability is the foundation of social intelligence. When you develop self-awareness, your emotional triggers become easier to recognize. Instead of exploding or shutting down without knowing why, you understand what sensation inside you is being activated. Maybe it's the fear of being dismissed. Maybe it's the need to be respected. Maybe it's the desire to feel important. When you know these emotional truths about yourself, you're less likely to misinterpret the behavior of others. Instead of assuming someone is judging you, you pause and ask yourself if the discomfort comes from your own insecurity. Instead of assuming someone is ignoring you, you check whether the fear of being overlooked is being activated. This pause is the birthplace of emotional maturity, and emotional maturity is what makes someone truly socially intelligent. Self-awareness also allows you to monitor how your energy affects others. People respond not just to what you say, but to the emotional state behind your words. If you are anxious, people feel it. If you are tense, people react to it. If you are calm, others settle in your presence. When you know your own state of mind, you become intentional about the energy you bring into a room. You become aware of your tone, your expressions, your timing, and the space you take up. You recognize when you are overwhelming, when you are withdrawn, when you are defensive, or when you are trying too hard. This awareness helps you adjust, not to please people, but to communicate effectively without letting your internal turbulence distort the interaction. Self-awareness also sharpens your listening skills. Most people don't truly listen. They wait for their turn to speak, or they listen through the filter of their own anxieties and judgments. When you are aware of your inner dialogue, you learn when your mind is drifting, when your ego is trying to dominate the conversation, or when your insecurities are pulling you away from the present moment. You become conscious of the subtle moments when your emotions try to hijack your focus. This allows you to redirect your attention back to the other person and hear them without interruption from your internal noise. Real listening is one of the highest forms of social intelligence, and you cannot master it without first mastering your inner world. Self-awareness also helps you recognize your strengths and weaknesses in social situations. Some people talk too much when they're nervous. Some withdraw when they feel uncomfortable. Some interrupt without realizing it. Some dominate conversations to avoid vulnerability. When you are unaware of these patterns, you repeat them endlessly and wonder why your relationships feel strained. But when you see your own tendencies clearly, you can change them. You can learn to speak less and listen more. You can practice pausing before responding. You can build calmness when your anxiety rises. You can learn humility when your pride tries to control the room. This self-regulation transforms the way people respond to you. Self-awareness also protects you from manipulation. When you know your emotional vulnerabilities, your need for approval, your desire to feel useful, your fear of abandonment, you're less likely to be influenced by someone who tries to use those emotions against you. You see the difference between kindness and flattery, between advice and control, between genuine connection and emotional dependency. You become grounded, and grounded people are hard to manipulate because they understand their own internal levers. Another powerful aspect of self-awareness is understanding your core values. Values shape behavior, decisions, boundaries, and communication style. When you know what you stand for, you no longer dissolve into the expectations of others. You no longer say yes to things that harm you. You no longer change yourself to fit in. A person who is anchored in their values communicates with clarity, walks with confidence, and handles social pressure with strength. Others gravitate towards them because they are stable, centered, and emotionally dependable. Self-awareness also enhances empathy because it teaches you the complexity of your own emotions. When you understand how layered your internal world is, you naturally understand that others have the same emotional depth. You stop jumping to conclusions. You stop assuming you know someone's motives based solely on your perspective. Instead, you become curious, you ask questions, you observe without judgment, you empathize without losing yourself. This ability to view situations from multiple angles is what makes someone truly socially intelligent. It turns conflict into conversation and misunderstanding into clarity. As self-awareness deepens, you also learn to manage your expectations of others. You stop expecting people to behave the way you want them to. You stop demanding emotional perfection. You accept human imperfection because you have learned to accept your own. This acceptance does not weaken relationships, it strengthens them. It reduces friction, lowers disappointment, and brings people closer through understanding rather than pressure. Ultimately, self-awareness is the foundation that every other social skill is built on. Without it, communication becomes reactive, relationships become unstable, boundaries become confusing. But with self-awareness, everything becomes clearer. Your intentions, your emotions, your patterns, and your impact on others. And when you understand yourself, you unlock the ability to understand people on a deeper, more intuitive level, making social interaction feel natural rather than complicated, grounded rather than chaotic, and meaningful rather than accidental. People communicate more through behavior than words, because human expression is rooted in actions long before language even existed. Words are a relatively new tool in the history of human evolution, but behavior, body language, tone, energy, silence, facial expressions, consistency, has always been the real carrier of meaning. Words can be controlled, edited, rehearsed, or manipulated, but behavior reveals what the mind tries to hide. Most people listen to what others say, but the truth is found in how they say it, what they do afterward, and how they consistently show up over time. Behavior is the real language of human beings, and once you learn to read it, you see people with a clarity that words alone can never give you. Think about how often someone says, "I'm fine," while their posture is tense, their breathing is shallow, and their eyes are distant. The words say one thing, but the behavior speaks a completely different story. Someone might say they trust you, yet keep a guarded distance. Someone might say they're listening, but their body is angled away from you and their mind is clearly elsewhere. Someone might say they love you, but their actions never reflect care, effort, or consistency. Behavior is the true indicator of what a person feels, believes, and intends, and it rarely lies. Behavior is shaped by subconscious instincts, emotional patterns, and internal states. It reflects the truth long before words catch up. When a person feels comfortable, their body relaxes, their gestures soften, and their facial expressions open up naturally. When they feel threatened or insecure, their arms may cross, their shoulders stiffen, or their eyes dart nervously. These signals happen automatically, without conscious control, revealing the emotional reality beneath the words. Tone of voice is another powerful form of behavior that often carries more weight than words. The same sentence can express love, irritation, exhaustion, resentment, or excitement depending on the tone behind it. People may try to hide their feelings, but tone exposes them instantly. A slight shift in pitch, a pause, a sigh, or a wavering voice can reveal more fear, frustration, or affection than 1,000 words ever could. Silence is another form of communication that people underestimate. Silence can mean hesitation, discomfort, confusion, understanding, approval, anger, or emotional withdrawal. Sometimes silence is a way of protecting oneself. Sometimes it is a sign that words are not enough to express what someone feels. Sometimes it is a sign that communication has already broken beneath the surface. Understanding silence requires emotional sensitivity, because silence often speaks the loudest in moments where words fail. Consistency is one of the strongest behavioral signals of all. Words can make promises, but only behavior can fulfill them. Someone might swear they will change, improve, or prioritize you, but if their actions remain unchanged, the truth is revealed. Consistency exposes character. It shows commitment, discipline, honesty, and reliability. Inconsistent behavior, on the other hand, exposes fear, confusion, lack of clarity, or lack of genuine intention. People reveal who they are not through what they say once, but through what they repeatedly do. Even small behaviors speak volumes. A person who remembers small details about you shows care and attentiveness. A person who keeps interrupting reveals impatience or insecurity. Someone who always looks at their phone during conversations shows distraction or disengagement. Someone who avoids eye contact might be hiding something, or they might feel shy or intimidated. Every action contains emotional data that helps you understand the person behind the behavior. Human behavior also reveals emotional boundaries. People show how close they feel to you through their physical distance, through the openness of their posture, and through how freely they express themselves. Someone who feels safe with you will lean in, make steady eye contact, relax their shoulders, and share more openly. Someone who feels unsafe will lean away, stay guarded, speak carefully, or keep emotional walls in place. These behaviors happen automatically, long before any conscious decision is made. Actions also reveal values and priorities. If someone makes time for you even when they're busy, they value you. If they only show up when it's convenient, you're not a priority. If they consistently follow through, they value accountability. If they constantly break promises, their words lose credibility. You can learn more about a person's character by observing how they treat others, especially when there is nothing to gain. Kindness, respect, and humility are often expressed more through behavior than through speeches. People also communicate through emotional energy. The energy someone brings into a room can tell you whether they are stressed, confident, calm, or overwhelmed. Humans instinctively sense emotional energy long before we interpret words. This is why someone can walk into a room and instantly change the atmosphere without saying a single sentence. Emotional energy radiates through micro-expressions, movement patterns, tone, and presence. Behavior also reveals compatibility. You can understand someone better by observing how they react under stress, how they handle disappointment, how they navigate conflict, and how they treat people they disagree with. Words during calm moments matter, but behavior during difficult moments reveals true emotional intelligence. How someone behaves when they're angry, scared, or frustrated shows more about their character than what they say when everything is easy. People also communicate through what they don't do. A lack of effort is communication. A lack of support is communication. A lack of respect is communication. Ignoring problems, avoiding conversations, withholding affection. This is all behavioral communication that speaks louder than any sentence. Absence is also a form of behavior, and it often reveals deeper truths than presence. When you start watching behavior instead of relying solely on words, you see reality with much greater clarity. You stop being confused by contradictions. You stop being misled by empty promises. You stop taking words at face value and begin to understand the emotional truth behind them. People reveal themselves every day through subtle actions, and the more aware you become of these signals, the more skillfully you can navigate relationships, communication, and human connection. Most conflict comes from misinterpretation, not intention. Because human beings rarely see a situation exactly as it is, they see it as they are. Every person interprets the world through their own emotional lens, shaped by their past experiences, insecurities, assumptions, and internal narratives. When something happens, the mind instantly fills in the blanks, often with fear-based guesses rather than reality. These interpretations can transform neutral moments into perceived threats, innocent words into emotional wounds, and simple misunderstandings into full-blown conflicts. Most people are not trying to hurt each other, they are simply reacting to what they think is happening rather than what actually is. The brain is wired to protect you, and because of this, it's constantly scanning for danger or disrespect. Even in ordinary conversations, the mind may misinterpret a tone, a pause, a facial expression, or even someone's silence as negativity or judgment. A delayed reply is seen as rejection. A short message is seen as anger. A different opinion is seen as attack. A moment of distraction is seen as disrespect. Because humans are emotional creatures, they often assume intention where none exists. This is why two honest people can end up in conflict without either person wanting to cause harm. Misinterpretation often begins when someone is already carrying emotional tension from elsewhere. A person who feels insecure may misinterpret feedback as criticism. A person who fears abandonment may misinterpret distance as rejection. A person who has been betrayed in the past may misinterpret uncertainty as dishonesty. The conflict that follows doesn't come from what the other person actually did. It comes from what the mind imagines they meant. The emotional reaction is real, but the story behind it is often inaccurate. When emotions drive interpretation, even simple moments become complicated. People also tend to assume the worst because negative interpretations feel more protective. If you prepare for disappointment, you feel safer. If you assume someone meant to hurt you, it gives you the illusion of control. But this defensive way of thinking creates needless conflict. Many arguments happen not because someone intended harm, but because their words or actions were taken in a way they never meant. A person's tone might sound sharp simply because they were tired. Someone might seem distant because they're overwhelmed, not because they're upset. Someone might forget something important, not out of carelessness, but because their mind is full. And yet, without communication, these neutral events can trigger emotional reactions that escalate quickly. Another reason misinterpretation leads to conflict is that people tend to listen to respond, not to understand. When someone speaks, their message gets filtered through personal biases. Instead of hearing what the person's meant, the listener hears what aligns with their fears or expectations. This leads to interruptions, defensiveness, and emotional escalation. A small misunderstanding grows because neither person stops to clarify what the other truly intended. People argue over imagined motives rather than actual actions. They defend themselves against accusations they never meant to imply. They react to assumptions instead of reality. Even in close relationships, misinterpretations happen frequently because familiarity creates false certainty. People assume they already know what the other person is thinking. They fill in gaps without asking questions. They attach meaning to expressions or habits without verifying the truth. This leads to conflict not because the intention was negative, but because communication was incomplete. The mind hates ambiguity, so it invents conclusions. Even when those conclusions cause emotional harm, social conditioning also plays a role. From childhood, people learn different ways of expressing emotion, different communication styles, and different ways of dealing with discomfort. A person who grew up in a loud, expressive home may not realize their intensity feels aggressive to someone who grew up in a quieter environment. A person who learned to avoid conflict may seem cold or withdrawn to someone who values direct communication. These differences are not intentional, but they create space for misinterpretation. When expectations collide, conflict arises, not because either person meant harm, but because they saw the situation differently. Technology has amplified misinterpretation even further. Messages without tone cause confusion, emojis get misread, delayed responses create anxiety, Without facial expressions or vocal tone, people rely entirely on their imagination, which often jumps to the worst-case scenario. A simple texting misinterpretation can snowball into emotional conflict, all based on assumptions rather than intention. Modern communication makes it easy to misunderstand each other because so much of human expression is lost in digital translation. Ego also contributes to misinterpretation. When pride or insecurity gets involved, people focus more on defending themselves than understanding the other person. Every comment feels like a criticism. Every question feels like a challenge. Every disagreement feels like disrespect. Conflict escalates quickly when someone believes their identity is under threat, even if the other person never meant it that way. The ego interprets harmless moments as personal attacks, and emotions react accordingly. Misinterpretation also grows in silence, when people don't communicate openly. The mind fills empty spaces with fear-based assumptions. If someone doesn't explain their thoughts, others imagine intentions that may be completely false. Silence becomes a breeding ground for misunderstanding, and in that silence, unresolved emotions create stories that drive people apart. Most relationships don't break from cruelty. They break from confusion. The truth is that most people want to be understood, not attacked. They want connection, not conflict. But without clarity, intention gets buried under emotional noise. The more self-aware and emotionally intelligent you become, the more you realize that conflict often dissolves the moment you ask a simple question. What did you mean by that? Misinterpretation is the root of most emotional pain because it transforms harmless situations into perceived threats. When people learn to clarify rather than assume, to understand rather than judge, most conflicts disappear before they ever begin. Empathy is a superpower when combined with boundaries because empathy alone makes you deeply aware of other people's emotions. But boundaries make sure you don't lose yourself inside them. Empathy allows you to feel what others feel, to understand their pain, their fears, their hopes, and their internal battles. It creates connection, compassion, and emotional closeness. But without boundaries, empathy becomes overwhelming and draining. You absorb too much, give too much, and carry emotions that were never yours to hold. When empathy is paired with strong boundaries, it turns into a powerful force, one that allows you to help others without harming yourself, to care without collapsing, and to understand without absorbing the weight of everyone else's world. People with big hearts often struggle because they feel everything intensely. They sense tension in someone's voice before others hear it. They notice shifts in energy that no one else picks up on. They take responsibility for other people's emotions, trying to fix, soothe, comfort, and carry what others cannot handle. But empathy without limits becomes emotional overextension. You become the person who is always listening, always giving, always supporting, always understanding, even when no one is doing the same for you. Over time, this leads to exhaustion, resentment, and emotional burnout. Boundaries protect the empathetic heart. They remind you that you can care without taking responsibility for another person's choices, moods, or healing process. Boundaries act like emotional filters, allowing compassion to flow, while preventing emotional overload. You understand someone's sadness, but you don't drown in it. You see someone's struggle, but you don't sacrifice your mental health to solve it. You hear someone's pain, but you don't make it your identity. This balance is what transforms empathy into a superpower instead of a weakness. Empathy with boundaries means you can listen deeply, but you also know when to step back. It means you can comfort someone, but still say no when necessary. It means you can be present for others without abandoning yourself. People often assume that empathy means giving endlessly, but true empathy understands the importance of self-preservation. You cannot pour into others if your own emotional cup is empty. Boundaries ensure that your empathy remains sustainable rather than self-destructive. Empathy makes you see the humanity in people, their childhood wounds, their hidden battles, their insecurities, their unspoken fears. But boundaries help you avoid falling into emotional traps. Without boundaries, empathetic people often attract individuals who drain them, people who take but never give, people who expect constant emotional labor, people who use sympathy as a shield for avoiding responsibility. Boundaries prevent manipulation. They help you distinguish between supporting someone and enabling them. They allow you to recognize when someone is asking for compassion but refusing accountability. With boundaries, empathy becomes a refined skill rather than an emotional vulnerability. Empathy also strengthens intuition. When you understand emotions deeply, you can sense underlying motives, detect dishonesty, and read emotional energy instantly. But intuition becomes clouded when you're too emotionally entangled. Boundaries keep your intuition sharp by separating your feelings from the other person's. You can observe without absorbing. You can see the truth clearly because you aren't lost in emotional noise. This gives you a rare form of emotional intelligence, one that can navigate relationships with clarity and discernment. Empathy with boundaries also creates healthier relationships. When you care too much without boundaries, you may tolerate disrespect, neglect, or emotional imbalance simply because you understand why the other person behaves the way they do. You forgive too easily, you excuse too quickly, you stay too long. But boundaries remind you that understanding someone's pain does not require you to accept their harmful behavior. You can acknowledge why someone is struggling while still holding them accountable. You can love someone and still protect yourself from their emotional storms. Empathy without boundaries often leads to self-neglect. You become so focused on others that you forget your own needs, your own voice, your own emotional limits. You end up feeling invisible in your own life. Boundaries pull you back into your own identity. They remind you that your feelings matter just as much as anyone else's. They teach you to care for others without abandoning yourself. Empathy is healing, but boundaries are empowering. Together, they give you the ability to connect deeply while standing firmly in your truth. You can be gentle without being weak. You can be loving without being exploited. You can be supportive without losing your stability. This balance is the hallmark of emotionally mature individuals, those who can navigate complex emotional environments without being swept away by them. Empathy with boundaries also improves your decision-making. When you can separate your emotions from someone else's needs, you make choices based on clarity, not guilt. You no longer feel forced to say yes when you want to say no. You no longer carry the emotional consequences of other people's choices. You no longer sacrifice your mental peace to maintain harmony. Instead, you operate from emotional strength, able to help when you can and able to step back when you must. Boundaries also deepen the quality of your empathy. When you are not drained or overwhelmed, you can give from a place of alignment rather than obligation. Your compassion becomes more genuine, more balanced, more effective. People feel your presence more because you are emotionally stable. You become someone who can uplift others without losing your own grounding. This kind of empathy is rare, powerful, and deeply influential. Empathy is a superpower because it connects you with the inner world of others. Boundaries make it a controlled superpower, directed, intentional, and sustainable. When these two forces work together, you become resilient yet compassionate, firm yet understanding, helpful yet protected. You navigate the emotional landscape of life with grace, strength, and clarity. You become someone who uplifts without absorbing, who cares without breaking, who understands without losing yourself. This is the level of emotional mastery that transforms empathy from simple sensitivity into true, life-changing power. Patterns speak louder than promises because words can be shaped to sound sincere, but behavior reveals the truth of who someone really is. Anyone can make promises in moments of guilt, excitement, or emotion. Anyone can say they will change, try harder, show up, commit more, or be better. But patterns are consistent. Patterns repeat. Patterns show what a person values, what they prioritize, and what they truly believe, regardless of what they say. When you understand this, you stop being swayed by temporary words and start paying attention to long-term actions. You stop judging people by their intentions and start understanding them through their consistency. Promises rely on emotion, but patterns rely on discipline. A person may genuinely mean what they say when they speak it, but meaning something is not the same as living it. Words can rise in moments of clarity, but patterns show up through weeks, months, and years of behavior. Someone may promise to respect your time, yet consistently arrive late. They may promise to communicate better, yet still avoid difficult conversations. They may promise loyalty, yet continue repeating the same behaviors that break trust. When a pattern contradicts a promise, the pattern is the truth. People reveal themselves through their routines without even realizing it. The habits they repeat tell you what they truly care about. If someone consistently makes time for you, that is not an accident, it is a pattern. If someone consistently forgets or dismisses your needs, that is also not an accident, it is a pattern. If someone consistently supports you during difficult moments, that's a pattern of loyalty. If someone consistently disappears when things get hard, that's a pattern of avoidance. Patterns are the silent language of human behavior and the most reliable predictor of future action. Most people want to believe promises because promises offer hope. They make you feel valued in the moment. They make you feel seen, reassured, or important. But hope without evidence creates illusions. You end up holding on to words while ignoring the behavior that contradicts them. This is why so many people stay in relationships, friendships, or situations that hurt them. They cling to promises instead of recognizing patterns. They become attached to what someone says they will become, rather than accepting who they consistently are. Patterns also show emotional maturity. Someone who consistently takes responsibility for their actions, apologizes with sincerity, and changes their behavior demonstrates genuine growth. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry," but only patterns of improved behavior show that the apology meant something. Real change is not measured by the depth of someone's words, but by the consistency of their actions. If behavior does not change, the promise holds no weight. In communication, patterns reveal how someone handles conflict. Do they shut down? Do they blame others? Do they become defensive? Do they disappear until things calm down? These reactions are not isolated incidents, they reflect deeper emotional tendencies. Over time, these tendencies become predictable. When you recognize the pattern, you understand the person's true emotional capacity, regardless of what they claim about themselves. In relationships, patterns reveal commitment more clearly than any declaration. A partner who consistently checks in, shows care, and follows through on their intentions is already showing love through action. Meanwhile, a partner who repeatedly chooses selfishness, neglect, or dishonesty is showing that their promises were only temporary comforts. Love is not shown in grand words. It is shown through small, repeated choices. You learn far more about a person's heart from their patterns than their speeches. Patterns also speak in friendships. A friend who is present when it matters, who respects your boundaries, and who consistently supports you shows loyalty through action. A friend who only appears when they need something shows a pattern of self-interest. You do not need them to explain their intentions, their behavior speaks for them. Emotional clarity comes from observing what people do repeatedly, not what they say occasionally. Even within yourself, patterns reveal truths you may not want to admit. You can promise yourself that you will start tomorrow, that you will change your habits, that you will leave a harmful situation, or that you will begin a new chapter. But your patterns show your mindset more honestly than your promises to yourself. If you repeatedly procrastinate, avoid responsibility, or sabotage opportunities, those patterns reflect internal fears or unresolved wounds. Understanding your own patterns is the first step toward real transformation, because awareness breaks the illusion created by empty self-promises. In professional environments, patterns also determine trust. Someone may talk about professionalism, but their pattern of missing deadlines or being disorganized tells a different story. A leader may speak about values, but their pattern of decision-making shows what they really stand for. A coworker may promise support, but their consistent absence during crucial moments reveals their reliability. Work ethic is shown through pattern, not declaration. Patterns also reveal emotional safety. People who make you feel calm, respected, and valued through repeated actions are offering genuine connection. People who constantly bring chaos, uncertainty, or inconsistency reveal emotional volatility. You do not need them to explain who they are, their behavior already did. Ultimately, patterns help you see truth without judgment or denial. They strengthen your intuition and make you wiser in your choices. When you trust patterns, you stop being confused by mixed signals. You stop giving endless chances to people who show the same behavior repeatedly. You stop making excuses for what you already know deep down. You begin to trust evidence over emotion, reality over hope, and consistency over promises.